James Joyce, in a letter to Nora, dated 1909, wrote, "You are my only love. You have me completely in your power. I know and feel that if I am to write anything fine and noble in the future, I shall do so only by listening at the doors of your heart. I would like to go through life side by side with you, telling you more and more until we grew to be one being together, until the hour should come for us to die." Hello once again, I'm Don Jackson, listening at those same doors for the heartbeat of the internet. Someone once said, "Love is an endless mystery, for it has nothing else to explain it." And it is true. But we do know that love is the most powerful force on the planet. There is nothing that can defeat it. No matter how many times a heart is broken, love is the only remedy. It is the time of the year when many decide to marry, so it makes sense that this is also the time for the most wedding anniversaries. Even if you married at another time in the year, I thought we would celebrate them all in this webcast. But I'd also like to invite you to celebrate one anniversary in particular. Then Almitra spoke again and said, "And what of marriage, master?" And he answered, saying, "You were born together, and together you shall be forevermore. You shall be together when the white wings of death scatter your days. Aye, you shall be together even in the silent memory of God. But let there be spaces in your togetherness, and let the winds of the heavens dance between you. Love one another, but make not a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving sea between the shores of your souls. Fill each other's cup, but drink not from one cup. Give one another of your bread, but eat not from the same loaf. Sing and dance together and be joyous, but let each one of you be alone, even as the strings of a lute are alone, though they quiver with the same music. Give your hearts, but not into each other's keeping, for only the hand of life can contain your hearts. And stand together, yet not too near together, for the pillars of the temple stand apart, and the oak tree and the cypress grow not in each other's shadow." An excerpt from The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. When we marry, we promise to love and cherish for the rest of our lives. Sadly, that is not always the case. Our overburdened divorce courts are proof of that. But there are some who manage to make it a lifelong commitment. They take their vows seriously and face whatever comes together as a unit. It may be that they are true soulmates. You have to go back millennia to find the origin of the concept. Plato, in the Symposium, written circa 400 BC and translated by Benjamin Jowett, said, "So ancient is the desire of one another which is implanted in us, reuniting our original nature, seeking to make one of two and to heal the state of man. Each of us, when separated, having one side only, like a flat fish, is but the tally half of a man, and he is always looking for his other half. Suppose Hephaestus, with his instruments, to come to the pair who are lying side by side, and say to them, 'What do you mortals want of one another?' They would be unable to explain. And suppose further that when he saw their perplexity, he said, 'Do you desire to be wholly one, always, day and night, in one another's company? For if this is what you desire, I am ready to melt and fuse you together, so that being two, you shall become one, and while you live a common life as if you were a single man, and after your death in the world below, still be one departed soul instead of two. I ask whether this is what you lovingly desire, and whether you are satisfied to attain this. There is not a man of them who, when he heard the proposal, would deny or would not acknowledge that this meeting and melting into one another, this becoming one instead of two, was the very expression of his ancient need. And the reason is that human nature was originally one, and we were a whole, and the desire and pursuit of the whole is called love. This was written in the 13th century by Cohn Dao Sheng. It is called Married Love. You and I have so much love that it burns like a fire in which we bake a lump of clay molded into a figure of you and a figure of me. Then we take both of them and break them into pieces and mix the pieces with water and mold again a figure of you and a figure of me. I am in your clay. You are in my clay. In life, we share a single quilt. In death, we will share one coffin. For 47 years, they had been married. How deep back the stubborn, gnarled roots to the quarrel reach, no one could say. But only now, when tending to the needs of others no longer shackled them together, the roots swelled up, visible, split the earth between them, and the tearing shook even to the children long since grown. An excerpt from Tell Me a Riddle by Tilly Olson, published in 1964. Not all marriages are bliss. As an outsider, you might wonder how the couple manages to stay together. There might be an answer in this excerpt from The Knot of Vipers by Francois Mauriac and translated by G. Hopkins. For close on half a century, we too had been enemies, and now, on this heavy afternoon, the enemies had suddenly become aware of the bond created in spite of the long, drawn-out struggle by a shared old age. We might seem to hate one another, but for all that, we had reached the same point in the road. There was now nothing beyond that promontory on which we stood awaiting death. Husbands and wives of long standing never hate one another as much as they think they do. Allison Roberts in the Sacramento Bee, and also featured in the Social Studies column of the Globe and Mail, were the sources for this tale that's been around the internet a few times. A married couple, both 60, were celebrating their 35th wedding anniversary. During their party, a fairy appeared to congratulate them and to grant them each one wish. The wife wanted to travel around the world. The fairy waved her wand, and poof, the wife had tickets in her hand for a cruise. Next, the fairy asked the husband what he wanted. He said, "I wish I had a wife 30 years younger than I." So the fairy picked up her wand, and poof, the husband was 90 years old. On a more serious note, how could I possibly do a webcast about wedding anniversaries and not mention the film The Sixth Sense? The scene where Bruce Willis shows up late for his anniversary dinner haunts me even today as I write this show. In case you've been off the planet and haven't seen it, I won't tell you much about this movie except to say that not everything vanishes without a trace. Something of our soul remains behind, to linger near the ones we love. And then there was a great line in the film Deep Impact, which tells the story of a comet that is headed to Earth and a group of astronauts who are sent to intercept it and destroy it. Robert Duvall plays the veteran astronaut on the mission. On board the ship, Robert Duvall's character tells one of the other crew members about his long relationship with his wife, who had been dead for a number of years. He says that in every marriage, you go through periods of good years and periods of bad years, but the viewer is left with the impression that no matter what the struggle, they endured the bad years and celebrated the good ones together. He said that if there was anything to be thankful for in the face of such a tragedy, then it's that she died during one of their best years together. We can only hope that death will be that considerate to us all. It was the hottest day in July when I married my true companion, July 28, 1990, at a little church in Montreal. The church was not air-conditioned, and as we stood at the altar, we were hoping the minister would get to the vows before he passed out from the heat. Later that day, at our reception, Lydia and I had a surprise for our guests. We had hired one of Montreal's best bar bands, the Jimmy Dogs, to play for the dance. I got to pick all the songs and made sure all her favorites were played by our favorite band. It seemed we had stumbled upon a great idea because all our guests had a blast. Our reception was even crashed by a few guests in the hotel who must have heard the band and decided to dance for a while. They signed our wedding book, Batman and Robin. You know, it seems like it wasn't that long ago. I can still remember our special day and our family and friends who helped to give our marriage a great start. And I don't need a string around my finger or a mark on the calendar to remember my anniversary. But there was one anniversary that I certainly won't forget. July 28th, 1995. Terrible thunderstorm blew through. It was going to be a busy night in the birthing suites of our closest hospital. You see, my wife was in one of those beds going through premature labor on our wedding anniversary. My son was, and still is, a rambunctious sort, anxious to get on with life. He just couldn't wait until the time was right. He was eager to get started on his life. My wife and I were going out for an anniversary celebration that night. The babysitter, my mother, was there to look after my daughter for the evening, but my wife knew something was wrong by late afternoon. She was immediately sent up to the birthing floor and attended to by the doctor on duty. The doctor made an evaluation and decided that our little guy should stay right where he was for a little while longer anyway. And so it is an anniversary I will never forget. Our son was born on August 17th that year at 9:10 in the morning. There was something all three of us, my wife, daughter, and I, stood to learn from him, and he is still trying to learn patience from us. July 28th, 1990, a date that is etched on the inside of my wedding band. And all these many years later, Lydia is still the love of my life. Looking into the eyes of both my children and at the home we've made over the years, I simply can't imagine what my life would have been like without her. A proverb from the Indian subcontinent states, "Where love reigns, the impossible may be attained." And finally, The Golden Gift by John C. Bonser from Chicken Soup for the Golden Soul. And I quote, "Our golden wedding day draws near," the husband said. The elderly woman, smiling, raised her head. "Will you write me a poem as you used to do?" That's the gift I'd like most from you." The old man, agreeing, limped from the room, went out on the porch in the twilight's gloom, leaned on the railing, and reminisced. Often we sat here, shared hopes, and kissed. Dear Lord, how the years have hurried by. Those memories of youth make an old man sigh. Now we grow weary and bent and gray. What clever words can I possibly say to show that I love her just as much as I did when her cheeks were soft to my touch, when her eyes were bright and her lips were warm, and we happily walked with her head on my arm. So the husband stood while the evening breeze echoed his sigh through the nearby trees, till the joys they had shared in days long past merged into thoughts he could voice at last. And he went inside and got paper and pen, sat down at the kitchen table, and then carefully wrote what his wife had desired, a gift as golden as a love inspired. "Sweetheart, dear wife, my closest friend, with you my days begin and end. Though time has stolen strength and youth, it cannot change this shining truth. Our love has lasted all these years, while hardships came with sorrow's tears. We've met each test and gotten by, and I will love you till I die. We are not rich in worldly wealth, but we own nothing gained by stealth. And you remain my greatest treasure, my source of pride and quiet pleasure. I wish you all the happiness with which two loving hearts are blessed. You were and are my choice for life, my girl, my lady, my sweet wife." The poem finished, the husband arose, went into the room where his good wife dozed, and tenderly kissed her nodding head. "Wake up, sleeping beauty, and come to bed." End quote. On one very special anniversary card, it said, "Anniversaries are special times when the love in our hearts is put into words." And such was the case in that wonderful story from Chicken Soup. It's been a while since I've been able to do a show that I could dedicate to my wife on our anniversary. This is yours, Lydia. As promised, there will come an anniversary in the future when we'll have all our friends together again to hear us repeat our vows. Save me the first and last dance. Happy anniversary, Lydia. Good night, sweet dreams. I'm Don Jackson.